Hello, audience. Hello, my speakers. Let me see where David is. There she is. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Wednesday, middle of the week. I know this week is being a little slow for most people because of the holidays here in the US. Everyone's still like burping a little turkey, but let's get things going. Um, I'm so excited about this event today, audience. Um, Audience, since you're here, let us know where you're calling from in the chat. I love to know from you. I am in New York City. It's very, very cold here today, even though it's sunny. But New York City, Brooklyn specifically, let us know where you're calling from.
Eduardo, mic can be a little closer. Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Awesome. Sorry for that. So I was saying, audience, please let us know where you're calling from into the public chat, so we can know where you're calling from. I am in New York City. It's very cold in here today. Sunny, but very cold. Not the best. But let us know where you're calling from while I do my quick introduction here. So, as I mentioned, my name is Eduardo. I am a community events manager at Modern Sales Pros, and we are here today to talk about compensation plans with those three experts here. For those of you not familiar with MSP, we are the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our modern sales pros. And our mission is to create an environment for members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there and to help them see around corners they might not know about. And we do that through live events like this one you're about to experience. We have a robust online forum. We have 35K members in our online forum, so you can go there, ask your questions, and with 35K people answering your questions, I'm pretty sure no questions will be left unanswered, and you'll have a lot of help to solve your problems. We also have summits. Those are like intensive master classes with the best revenue leaders out there. And we are back into in-person events, which is very exciting. So if you're not already part of the MSP community, you'll be invited to join right after this event. Um, but that's enough about MSP and other events. Let's focus on this one and how to get the most out of this experience. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded. You will access the recording right after this event. I'm going to send a follow-up email with the link for you to watch us and get the content that you need. And please share your questions in the Q&A tab. We have the Q&A tab and we also have the chat, and it's wide open. I was talking with the speakers. They were like, oh, the week is a little slow. Let's get things going. And I asked them, what will energize you? And they said, we need a lot of questions. So let's keep the energy up and send a lot of questions to the speakers. Um, as I mentioned, we're here to talk about compensation plans. I have the three specialists. I am going to pass the mic to Aditya from Everstage. Aditya, you can introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about Everstage and then ask the speakers to introduce themselves. And then you can kick off the conversation. I'm going to be watching live and taking notes. So once you're done with the conversation, I'll be back and to do some closing remarks. But the floor is yours now.
Thanks, Eduardo. Hey, everyone. Welcome to today's session, Revamping Your Compliance for Success 2024 edition. I'm super excited for this session today, and it's at a very crucial point of the year. Considering your annual plan as the roadmap, right? Then your comp plans are basically the compass that guides you towards achieving these goals. In today's session, we're going to cover how we're going to assess your comp plan, reevaluate the key metrics, and revamp them for success for 2024. As your objective changes every year, your goals move, your comp plan needs to be adjusted accordingly. The key is to continually adapt them to your changing goals. I'm your host, Adit, commission planning expert from Everstage. Everstage is the number one rated sales commission platform on G2 and Gartner. With this, we have two more speakers joining the panel today. Number one, Siva Rajamani, co-founder and CEO of Everstage, and David Miller, Senior Manager, Global Incentive Compensation, Integrated DNA Technologies. Siva and David, would you like to introduce yourself for our audience?
Yep. David, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here. I am David Miller. I am the Senior Manager of Global Incentive Compensation at Integrated DNA Technologies, which is part of the Danaher Corporation. I do want to clarify up front that what I'll be sharing in our talk today represents my personal opinion and is not necessarily the opinion or perspective of my employers. I do have about 15 years of experience working with sales compensation plans, design, and implementation. I spent about the first half of my career on the consulting side, working with dozens of corporations across multiple industries. And then the second half of my career switched over to the corporate side to handle the actual administration of sales compensation.
Fantastic. Thanks, David. And it's great to have you as part of the speaker panel. Hey, everyone. I'm Siva Rajamani. I'm the founder and CEO of Everstage. As Adit mentioned, Everstage is the #1 rated sales compensation management platform on G2 and Gartner based on 1,500 plus reviews. Originally, before starting Everstage, I used to run the revenue operations globally for Freshworks, the now publicly listed company. And so this particular topic is something that's very close to my heart because, as an operator, personally, me and my team were involved in a lot of thought process and brainstorming on, how to best align our commission plans with the overall business objectives. Of course, as part of the Everstage journey in the last 4 years, we've also come across 1,000+ companies and their commission plans and how they've evolved over time. So happy to share all our learnings so far in this session. Over to you, Adit.
Thanks, sir. And so I'm going to hand over to you to kickstart the session and talk about what do you feel about comp plans?
Fantastic. So I think why don't we start off with talking about why comp plans get outdated, right? Obviously, there are broadly a couple of fundamental things that, keep changing. One is, of course, your company's overall goals in terms of what your sales strategy is, what your go-to-market strategy is. They keep evolving over time, and so therefore, whatever you set it out in terms of your compensation plans, at the end of the day, incentives drive behavior, and incentives need to be closely aligned with your overall business goals. So when business goals change, obviously, you want to make sure your compensation plans are evolving closely with those business goals. But why do business goals evolve? Obviously, that's because of the more macro aspect, which is the market itself, right? Things are dynamic in the market. The overall macroeconomics change, your competitive landscape changes, and therefore your business and your sales goals, keep evolving. So it's super important to make sure as you start to think about your new annual goal for the year, you re-evaluate your sales compensation plan and see if it's still aligned and relevant to the evolving goals of your company. Of course, apart from the overall macro changing, the overall business goal changing, there could be other reasons as well why compensation plans could get outdated. Some of those things could include things like you created an incentive plan with a certain structure in place, but what ended up happening was the actual impact of it was seen slightly differently. For example, what we've commonly seen in a lot of companies is the quota payout structure against targets might be at a certain percentage, but because of multiple different metrics that you're bringing in, or for that matter, several different accelerators, your payouts could be very different from what the quota attainments were, and that might mean that your incentive payouts are not aligned truly to how your business goals are achieved at the company. So that's one of the common themes that we've seen in several companies. There could be other things like your teams not being aware and therefore having to understand the compliance better. What happens over time is you start to add layers to the compensation plans, and over time it gets very complicated for people sometimes to understand how they get what they get, and that means that there could be other issues which could be in sales motivation, or for that matter even employee turnovers, and so therefore you might want to constantly keep tabs of what's happening with your end sales teams and ensure that your compensation plans are aligned. So I think broadly, there could be multiple different reasons, but the more important thing is to ensure that at the end of the day, your compensation plans are closely tied to what you're going after, and if they're actually working the way it was meant to be. So with that context, maybe we could jump into the next slide, which also kind of talks about why they need reevaluation every year. For most folks, some of you might be aware, but for most folks, you might not be aware. Sales compensation as an expense item in most companies ends up being close to 10% of the overall organization's expenses. And if you look at the overall customer acquisition costs, then typically, depending on the business that you're in, sales compensation as an expense could range anywhere between 30 to 60% of the expense. So it's a very significant business expense. But at the same time, the best part about this is it's also a very significant lever that companies could use in order to make sure they're driving the right behavior. So it's super important aspect of your overall organization's goals. So for you to make sure they're aligned to what you want to drive from those incentive plans. Of course, it's obvious that it's a very key motivator for reps. Reps do try and understand what their compensation plans say and try to go after those based on whatever is prioritized in the compensation plan. So it's really crucial to ensure you keep your plans up to date. What we've seen is most of the companies, 9 out of 10 companies, reevaluate compensation plans annually. And when we say reevaluate, they constantly check for, the broad construct of the comp plan might remain the same. In some companies, of course, every few years that might also change. But they're constantly evaluating the finer aspects of the comp plan, right? Whether the particular lever that you're added for the sales team or for that matter, any other team, is that actually working as intended? Is that something that needs, some changes? So these are, it may not be the overall comp plan construct itself, but those specific aspects within those comp plans that typically might be worthwhile reevaluating every year. And what we've seen is the average time for evaluation and rolling out a new plan can take anywhere between 4 to 6 weeks to up to 3 to 4 months. So if your annual year is, the fiscal year is your annual year, Jan to December, then if you've not already started looking at your comp plans, then you might be slightly late for the next year. So because it does take considerable amount of time to, one, look at historical data, see what's worked, what's not worked, understand your overall business goals for the subsequent year, and then ensure that you do a little bit of consultation as well with your end stakeholders before you then finalize and forecast what's needed to be done from a comp plan standpoint. So the overall process can take anywhere between 1.5 months to 3 to 4 months. So earlier that you start, the better. If you've not already started, it's not too late, but because the impact of what compensation plans can create is significant, so it's worthwhile, at least looking at all of the aspects of the comp plan before you move into the next year. So with that context, how do you go about going about this process of reevaluation, right? So broadly 4 steps that kind of covers this, and of course we'll get into the specifics and details of it. I think David and Adit are going to cover some of the specifics, but if you were to look at the broad construct, it's 4 specific steps that goes about in terms of reevaluating comp plans, right? So one, of course, is understanding what the overall business goals are and ensuring that your comp plans are aligned to that overall business goals. For example, this could mean that understanding in the last 2 years, several things have changed for most companies. Back in 2021, most companies were focused on growth at all costs. Obviously, it's evolved in the last 1-2 years where things have become much more focused on profitability and meaningful growth rather than growth at all costs. So understanding what the strategic perspective of the company is, of the industry that you're in, and also what your specific business goals are, will help determine what you need to incentivize as part of your compensation plan. Now, if obviously, as most companies go, you're looking at more profitable growth, then there could be specific metrics that might need reevaluation. For example, if you look at software companies, a lot of software companies and SaaS companies have started to look at not only revenue growth as lever, but NRR, the net revenue retention, as one of those levers, where you're starting to think of ensuring that your existing customers are continuing to contribute to the revenue and also expanding as you grow in terms of your comp plan, in terms of your overall business growth. So essentially ensuring and understanding what are those metrics that could potentially get influenced by those overall business goals, and then trying to see how you can incentivize would be the second step. So for example, in this case, if NRR is one of the focus areas for the company, how can you incentivize sales teams in terms of driving that NRR growth? Would it mean like incentivizing sales teams to bring in more multi-year contracts, right? Do you want to bring in put in accelerators to those multi-year contracts vis-a-vis a monthly or an annual contract? So those are things that you start to think about considering NRR as one of those major metrics to influence. Now, once you have identified those metrics, then you go about obviously modeling and testing the overall impact of these comp plans. As we talked about, compensation plans are a significant business expense, but a crucial lever to drive growth. So you want to balance out what you incentivize with what it costs. So if, again, going back to this example, if NRR growth is one of the focus areas, and if you're incentivizing multi-year contract and probably putting in an accelerator, what's the right accelerator? Is it 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 times of the regular payout? Whatever that be, you want to test it out with back historical data, see how this would impact in terms of cost, and what is your goal overall in terms of how much multi-year contract percentage that you want to drive in your business in the subsequent year. And obviously, once you model this, tested it all out, I think the crucial part about compensation plans, and we have obviously experts on this panel, but you would hear every one of them say that it's great that you modeled all of this, tested all of it, but ultimately it wouldn't work if you don't plan the rollout well in terms of aligning the stakeholders and all the leaders within the stakeholder group that you are working with, ensuring that you communicate clearly what's changed between the last year to this year, and also help the teams with visibility in terms of helping them understand not just theoretically how the plans work, but also helping them visualize what this means to their overall payouts, whether it be helping them take their pipeline data, helping them play around with that pipeline data and say, hey, because of these aspects in your comp plan, if you were to close a deal in a certain way, and this is how much commissions that you could get paid. Because at the end of the day, incentives can drive behavior, but they could drive behavior only when you know what those are. So it is very important that reps know ahead of time, what influences their overall payouts before they take certain actions within their deal. So I think broadly, going back, it's 4 specific steps that go into reevaluation. I'll let Adit and David take it forward in terms of the specifics of these 4 steps.
David, would you like to start about assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that you really need to look at when you begin your yearly evaluation process is start with roles. Sometimes this can be counterintuitive, particularly if you're sales leadership. You come to the table hoping to talk about commissions, but instead you end up talking about roles. But it's important to understand that sales roles really define and determine what the commission plans should hope to achieve, right? And here we have a grid of that's a very common grid for evaluating roles. I'm sure most of you have seen it, so I won't belabor it. But you have individuals who are either selling to new customers, new markets, or they're selling to existing customers. That would be your hunters and your farmers. And then on the product side, you have individuals who may be selling new products to existing customers. They may be selling existing products to existing customers, or they may be trying to do some things in new markets that either involve current products or new products. And so each one of these grids represents a different type of role, a different type of role that necessitates a different type of sales incentive plan, pay mix, base salary, target incentive, etc. Probably we could have a whole webinar sometime just talking about how roles are linked to sales commissions. But I would just finish this slide by saying that this is really the first step, and the most important step is to ensure that your roles are clarified. Next slide. All right, so the assessment. The assessment in my mind is really an ongoing process. It's not an event. I think that you can enter into your annual planning process having spent at least a couple of quarters assessing your plans. I think really assessment begins the day after you roll out your new plans. There are a number of different ways that you can do this. The first box there where it talks about analyzing the previous year's performance. You can have the people who calculate your sales incentives evaluate performance after every pay cycle. So if you pay monthly commissions, if you pay quarterly commissions, after the very first month or Q1 commissions are paid, take a look at how the results panned out. Take a look at those people who received the highest amount of incentives. Were those actually your high performers, or were people earning a lot of money doing things that you didn't want them to do? Take a look at the low payouts. Are the people who earned the least actually low performers? If that's not the case, then there may be some issues there. Likewise, I think it's good to take a look at your overall payouts for the entire sales organization. What is the median payout? Do the payout distributions, are they distributed nicely around that median payout? Or is it lumped? Did lots and lots of people earn very little, and a few people earned a lot? Those are some of the things that you can look at, as well as the overall total dollar spend on sales incentives for that period. Does that align with your organization's performance? So these are some things you can gather. Likewise, benchmarking data, taking a look at market compensation reports, et cetera. This can be a lengthy process, particularly if you want to adjust base salaries. I would recommend that this be started in Q2. It gives you the time to be able to really focus on it so that you can come into your annual planning with some actual recommendations of structural changes that need to happen for your salespeople. Likewise, collecting feedback, I think it's better if it's ongoing. I know that sometimes people like to gather this information through surveys and focus groups, but I believe that if your team is doing a good job with the sales incentive calculations, they're providing excellent service to the internal customers, they're going to be getting feedback on an ongoing basis. Sales managers, sales reps will tell you their concerns if you have a reputation for providing that good customer feedback. Likewise, partnering with sales op, HR, and finance, I think this should be an ongoing thing. For example, you can set up processes where you touch base on a regular basis with these different departments just to look at commissions. If you are not meeting regularly with your finance department to accrue future commissions, estimate payouts, and then evaluate actual payouts versus the estimate, I would highly recommend you do that. I think the finance department will always have very good insight on your sales incentive compensation plans. Next slide. All right, so strategic alignment. This is the thing that we're always striving for with sales incentive plans. It really is much more of an art than a science, in my experience. Here you can see there are 4 dynamics at play that contribute to strategic alignment. In my opinion, these 4 dynamics need to really be held in tension with one another. So if you look at your organizational goals, you look at sales comp best practices, you look at market benchmarking, and finally motivating employees. In my experience, you can't really overhaul all 4 in the same year. I think each year you need to decide, where am I really going to emphasize? You may make small changes in all 4 areas, but you need to identify which of these areas needs the greatest amount of improvement, and then strive for incremental change. I believe sales incentive plans are best designed with that incremental growth mindset, recognizing that there really is no such thing as a perfect plan. But each year we can do a little bit better. As far as these individual areas or dynamics are concerned, I don't want to talk too much about best practices and benchmarking because I know we're going to deal with that a little bit later in the presentation, but I did want to touch a little bit on how to align your plans with your organizational goals. A couple of thoughts I have here is, number one, it's really important to make sure that you take a step back and revisit your big picture organizational goals and make sure that your sales incentive plans are aligned to those. Many times I have seen sales leadership be extremely focused in Q3 on something that's very immediate and very urgent. And because that's at top of mind, that small issue becomes the centerpiece of the next year's sales incentive plan, which is not really strategic alignment. So it's important when you go through the exercise of beginning to look at your plans for next year that you take a step back, identify what are short-term issues versus the long-term goals that you're hoping to achieve. Secondly, Siva talked about the obsolescence of a business strategy. I think best practices, an organization should revisit its strategy every 3 to 5 years, maybe a little quicker if you're in a more fast-paced industry. But your alignment of your incentive plans to the business strategy really should also follow that same life cycle. So if your organization has designed a good business strategy in a previous year and you're just incrementally tweaking that strategy, then the big components of your incentive plan should likely not change in that particular year, and you may just focus on some small incremental changes. On the other hand, if you've spent this last year revamping your organization's overall business strategy, then this is a good opportunity to revamp your comp plans as well. When you do have the opportunity to revamp your comp plans to align with a new business strategy, I think this is also a great opportunity for simplification. In my experience, as a business strategy ages over that 3 to 5 year process, you'll find that as you get into years 3, 4, and 5, your sales compensation plans will often get more complicated because you're trying to prop up that strategy as it ages. But when you get to that point where you start with a fresh strategy, you can also turn over that new leaf for your sales incentive plans as well. And you can really slim things down to the most essential components and get rid of some of the noise. All right. So I think at this point, Adit, do I hand it off to you?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, David, for covering about it. So the next part of your comp plan revamping exercise is to reevaluate your core metrics. The first metric that we start with is your performance measure. Performance measure is basically the core component of your sales plan. It's what that at the end of the day you want your reps to drive their behaviors towards. And it can take a variety of different categories. It can be based on volume, where you want them to focus on just dollar revenue, gross margin, etc. Or you might go into sales effectiveness, where you're going to talk about product attachment rate, cross sell, number of accounts closed, etc. Or you move into resource utilization, where you talk about productivity, quota attainment as your metrics. So each business is unique, and each role across different functions will all have unique performance measure that you're going to arrive based on your business need. But how do you reevaluate your comp plan to see whether these performance measures are working today or not? And we have arrived at this framework basically with a lot of help from a lot of our consulting exercises that we have done. And most of the times, the best practice comes down to this. First, you cannot have anything more than 3 output measures in your sales compensation plan. It needs to be as low as possible. This means for a sales rep in software, you can have dollar revenue goal as one of the benchmarks, number of accounts goals probably as a secondary benchmark, and just stop it at that, right? When you keep adding a lot of output measures into it, it usually distorts the entire purpose of your incentive plan and distracts them from their main goal. The second thing is basically to have some amount of importance to each performance measure that is there. What happens over a period of time in compensation plan? Like we have been part of those big companies with 5 7 years of comp plan revisions, and then you have at least like a 10 to 15 page document with a lot of different performance measures there, and that basically dilutes the focus from other areas. With both of these, if you are able to marry that and arrive at 2 to 3 performance measures and keep it very clean and simple and have meaningful impact towards those performance measures, should be at least 15% weightage or so, so that salespeople know that they're going to be rewarded for following a particular behavior. But what are those performance measures that you need to choose that with? The framework we have put together based on our experience, but what we've also seen has worked a lot for our customers around incentive circles. The concept of incentive circles itself is very straightforward, right? There are things that you can control, there are things that you can influence, and there are things that are your concern. When it comes to sales reps, there are certain things in their variable pay, incentive pay, that they want to actually have full control over. Let me take an example around this, right? Let's pick up 3 different industries so you get an overall sense of how this works in real world. Let's take software industry sales reps as an example. What can they control? Something like a deal size. They can prioritize what deals that they're going to be working on, and then basically say, hey, okay, this deal, if I'm able to focus and close this, I'm going to make this much incentive from it. They can influence something like a deal cycle time, where they can work with the customer or the prospect and try to push for a faster closure, but that's not in their control. At the end of the day, there are a lot of variables involved in making that aspect happen. And when it comes to onboarding and renewals, it's very important as a company, but that's not something your new business hunting sales rep needs to be worried about. This ties back to what David was talking earlier about sales job clarity as well, right? It's important to keep things that sales rep can control as your primary performance measure. And a lot of times, companies end up missing this out and try to add a lot of variables into their performance measure and try to measure everything and try to reward everything. And that's where this doesn't work, right? Let's take an insurance sales rep as an example. They can control their premium and renewals every year. They can influence the referrals that they get from customers, but something like a policy claim rate, for example, shouldn't even be part of their influence. So when you're reevaluating your comp plan, look for components that are there as part of their existing plan, which falls into these areas, right? Basically, can they control it? Like, is this something really that I can ask a sales rep to go after? And will they go ahead and prioritize this and be able to achieve this? Or is this something I'm just trying to create an accountability for because I want it done, but that's not really in control of sales rep? And trying to reduce such performance measure and actually simplifying your comp plans usually produces a lot better result compared to sticking with a very complex compensation plan. The first part of reevaluating your core metrics is performance measure. The second mix is your pay mix. Your pay mix is your base pay and target incentive ratio that's available, also known as on target earnings or total target cash compensation. In general, across the industry, the problem with pay mix comes when hiring happens without an operations or a finance person getting involved at that level. When it happens because you want to hire for someone and you want to optimize for speed and end up hiring bunch of sales reps with a lot of different pay mixes, where one of the reps is on a 30% pay incentive pay, another rep is on a 50% incentive pay. So a pay mix reevaluation not only ensures you're treating them all fairly, but also ensures that you're rewarding them all fairly. A sales rep who's pushing on all levers and hitting a lot of your revenue goals shouldn't be penalized with a lesser because they have a 30% incentive pay rate and not able to overachieve on that. So using your paymix benchmarking data, like in a lot of businesses, this is what we usually see. But when it comes to paymix, you are the best person to decide what you can today hire for in the market for a particular paymix. As long as you keep it consistent with your business benchmarks and ensure everyone in your sales team, everyone in your BDR team or CSM teams are all on the same similar paymix, that will solve for most of these problems. In terms of benchmarking that we have gathered, we usually see non-sales roles have a pay mix of anywhere between 90-10 to 80-20 ratio. And when it comes to sales roles and BDR roles, CSM roles, especially when it comes to non-outbound sales roles, we see the pay mix oscillating between 80-20 to 65-35. When it comes to outbound enterprise MMAs, this is where also your sales reps get a lot more expensive in terms of their take home. That's where the pay mix goes as high as 50-50 in general as well. Moving on to the next slide, and this is one of the most interesting aspects. You might wonder why a quota is part of revamping a comp plan, right? But that's where it starts. A lot of companies end up having, especially in the growth stage or in the late stage, what happens is setting fair, realistic quotas is very difficult. So it either becomes too difficult that a lot of your reps are not achieving their quota, or it becomes easily achievable and everyone is overachieving their quota. And both of these don't work, right? Because if a lot of your reps are not achieving the quota, then all your accelerator plans that you are going to set up, all your incentive driven behavior that you want to induce, they're not going to be able to go, like, be rewarded for any of that. And if it's all easily achievable, then you're probably being inefficient and leaving a lot of money on the table by not getting the best, more returns from your rep investments. So setting the right quota, although may not be an exactly a revamping your comp plan exercise, still plays a crucial role in the success of your comp plans. And how do we do that, right? Like, everyone knows it needs to be based on your revenue goals. It's based on sales role definition. And it's usually people all want to achieve at least 2/3 of your sales reps need to go hit their quota. But where this actually is usually the problem is around setting quotas across the board unilaterally without considering the regional nuances, the sales job clarity that David talked about, and making it a one size fits all. And this can usually arise from a point of view of finance driving the quota planning without getting enough sales involved in that process. And some of the few ways in which quota planning can be solved as part of sales compensation is one, to do a top down as well as a bottom up way of managing your quotas. And when setting sales quotas, getting sales reps involved in the process to see what is realistically possible, but also having a vision of what should be our ambition for the quota itself, right? And spending at least a 30 to 60-day timeline to ensure it is personalized and customized for each region based on the goals that they are taking up. When you have a one size all fits quota and have a one size all fits comp plan, the problem is there is going to be a new region you're going to open up in a new market, and you're going to end up overpaying for that region because the quotas were too low and you weren't prepared with the right comp plan for it, and now it's uncapped as well. So one of the crucial ways you can control your comp plan effectiveness is also to ensure your quota planning is aligned with your comp plan goals. The next step is around accelerators and caps. So the concept of accelerator is, like, everyone in sales and operations, it's very clear where above 100% or above a particular limitation, what are your earning potential for your salespeople. And usually when it comes to accelerator plans, it's tailored towards the outperformers. So you reward the ones that are covering for the other people's shortages, right? Like, so you want your best sales reps to pull the deal from next quarter into this quarter. You don't want them to leave it because, hey, I have a quarter target in next quarter. You want them to say, hey, I'm going to pay you more if you're going to bring it forward. And if they are bringing that revenue forward, you're also getting that cash flow forward. So there is potential benefits and plenty of studies that back up the importance of accelerators in general. But there are different ways to approach accelerators as such. And one of the common ways in which accelerators go wrong is when you ensure it happens without a logic in place, right? Like, you can't ensure for all roles that they have accelerators. The logic of non-sales roles, like a lot of CSM roles, BDR roles, or marketing roles come up, and then people want uncapped accelerators. You need to rethink a little there. A lot of companies end up overpaying and then regretting and then trying to see, hey, let's reduce it from next quarter. So accelerators for non-sales role in general needs to be in some way capped or limited at, let's say, 150 or 200% in general. Second, applying accelerators for all components. When you have multiple performance measure, for example, a BDR has a performance measure of, hey, I need to generate number of opportunities this month, and need to have a dollar pipe contributor of this dollar. Now, when you have both of these measures and try to apply accelerators on both of them, instead of just keeping it simple and then say, hey, the primary measure is the number of opportunities, and if you go overachieve on that, I'm going to reward you. That's when you're also able to directly influence, and you're also able to keep it simple for your BDRs so they are able to take it up and go hit it. When you apply to multiple accelerators, most of the times your BDRs are not going to get what those difference in acceleration is going to do for their variable pay, and it's not going to drive the right behavior, and you're just going to overpay for the already overperforming people and who would have been happy with just having a simple accelerator plan. And when do you apply accelerators? This is such an interesting topic, right? Like one of the sales leaders that I've seen who has worked in multiple Fortune 500 companies for 20 plus years, his most important point about when it comes to sales comp is if you're rewarding for anything less than 100%, you're just setting a bar too low for that. That will mean you're not even going to have most of your reps hit that goal. So when you're applying accelerators, always ensure it comes after they have hit the goal and it doesn't come before. The final section of this is to evaluate your thresholds and ramps. Thresholds is basically you're setting a certain benchmark within your team to say, hey, I'm going to have at least 30-40% of quota needs to be attained by a sales rep, after which sales incentive plan kicks in. The reason for threshold to exist today is not just to ensure the low performers are incentivized to push themselves, but it's also to ensure for the high performing reps that are moving towards, it's a milestone in the way that after a month they're able to hit 30%, 40% and hit the threshold. There is this aspect of achieving something in the middle of a quarter and then going to the next step. That's one of the common ways it has started to experience good emotional and motivational impact for your sales reps. Second policy for you to look at is how you're setting your ramp policy. Because a lot of times finance team gets super ambitious and then says, hey, we'll ramp everyone in a very short time. But in general, it often doesn't happen that way. And when your new reps are joining with not enough time to ramp, it usually ends up in a disappointment, right? Like they're not going to actually be super interested in their comp plan because they're going to miss their first quarter of payout because of insufficient ramp time. The general rule of thumb that we have seen based on experts is around your sales cycle days plus 90 days for them to get trained on your product and be able to successfully do a few demo sellings. And this is the summary of those important performance measure that you need to keep in mind. And if I were to summarize what all you need to reevaluate as part of your plan, number one is performance measure. Number two is pay mix analysis. Number three is looking at quotas and your performances. And finally, looking at what's going to happen to your accelerators, thresholds, and ramp. With all of this done, when you make changes at that scale to a lot of your comp plans, you're also worried about what their impact is going to be. This is where you need to start thinking of how should I project this for next year. So like David said, like your finance team is going to have enough data around last year to know what payout happened at what percentage levels and what was the final dollar value that they have gotten paid out. Can you project it for, let's say, hey, if everyone were to hit 50% attainment or 120% attainment, what is that going to be? Having a sales compensation platform with historical data like Everstage can help avoid a lot of manual work involved in that. But still, if you have to model this out and look at historical data, the metric to focus on is to what happens if everything happens according to your plan. What is going to be the budgeted payout versus what you're going to end up paying out. With that, I'm going to hand over back to David to talk about plan rollout and implementation.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll be brief here because I know we want to spend the last 10 minutes taking people's questions. So let's go to the next slide. All right, clear communication. There's a lot that could be said here. I'll just focus on one big thought, which is it's really important to cascade the communication of your new plans. Typically, you're going to have some sort of a design team working with you to come up with the high-level structure of your plans. That's your senior leadership, perhaps some functional experts if you have a sales compensation person on your team, perhaps somebody from finance or human resources. You want to keep the designs pretty confidential as you're working on that design. But then once you've got that high-level structure, I highly recommend showing that structure to your next level of management down the organization chart. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is showing a new plan to the sales reps and the sales managers at the same time. Your sales managers are going to see things with your plans that you won't see because they're actually out there working with the sales reps more closely than you are. And so giving some time in your process to get feedback from the sales managers and team leaders will make your plans better and will allow the managers to buy into the plans, and they can help you roll the plans out to your sales reps. Next slide. All right, it's really important to have good documentation. Most organizations, in my experience, have some sort of a formal compensation plan document, which is required for legal purposes and compliance. In my opinion, that's the least effective way to communicate a compensation plan, even though it is necessary. My recommendation is when you roll out your plans, you give everyone a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that you use. That PowerPoint presentation can explain why the plans are changing, what has changed, high-level overview of the different components, as well as some calculation examples so that the reps can actually see how new components will be calculated. I would then recommend you wait a month and issue the formal plan document later after the plans have actually rolled out. So if you follow a calendar year for your fiscal year, I would recommend rolling out the plans to everyone in December, following up in January with the plan document. The reason for that gap is it, again, allows you to make any last minute final tweaks that may come. Your sales managers will surface important issues, but sales reps also at times will surface some important issues that you can then capture in your commission plan document. You don't have to come up with revised commission plan documents a couple of weeks after you've rolled out the plan. All right, next slide. So again, just to recap, this process is what we've covered. There's a lot of pieces to it, lots more information that we could go into. But at this point in time, I think we want to go ahead and just open things up for questions. So Addit, you want to take a look at some of the questions and just see what people want to know more about.
Sure, David. Folks, feel free to ask any questions that you might have around compensation plan, reevaluation, or whatever. Probably even your current examples of what you're going through as well. I think both of our speakers could help you out. Eduardo, you want to join back to the stage?
Yes, let's see if the audience has any questions, but I do have a question for both of you. How often should a company revisit their compensation plans? Is it like every year, every quarter, every 6 months?
I would say every year is best. I think if you revisit it more often, then you're going to have a change management issue on your hands. The sales reps are going to feel like the goalposts are moving if you're changing your plans more often than that. However, I do think that mid-year you can tweak your plans if you find that that the market is more challenging than you anticipated. These are things that I call sweeteners. You can actually lower your threshold, for example, if it turns out that a lot of people are not attaining that threshold. You can add some additional kickers, just very small tweaks to the plan that make earning easier in a more difficult environment, I think are good mid-year. But the big changes and rollouts, I think, should happen just once a year.
Awesome. That makes sense. If like if the market's changing, if the sales cycle is longer and stuff like this, the plan should evolve. We have a question from Dustin. How do you buffer the sum of quotas to the company sales goals?
Yeah, so I'll take that, David.
Sure.
As I come from the DevOps background. So, Preston, just to be clear, it's basically what you're saying is the company has a 50 million overall sales goals, and then you're going to deploy 50 million plus X is the percentage, right? So the usual way I've seen buffer works is to whatever existing engines that you have in the business, the existing sales team that perform well, you try to add a little more there. So you have, let's say, your inbound sales are doing very well with 30 million target, and then extend it and give them a 32 million, 34 million target, and try to buffer with your new experiments and new regions, right? Like when you're opening up a new region or a new product and having a quota deployed towards them, it's better to keep a buffer there rather than trying to give everyone an equal buffer. Because as much as it might sound fair to have everyone an extra 10% quota and it's just fair across the board, that's not how it works. The risk carried by an existing engine and a new engine is completely different risk. So to optimize for that, I would say for your existing engines, keep as little buffer as possible and give them a reach quota. And for your new engines, assume they're not going to be able to do it, and they will require that buffer in the middle of the year to correct for their target. And we have another question as well. What about comp plans for sales that have ARR, MRR requirements, and how long to pay out on the long-term revenue if resubscription and maintain incentive for new sales? David, I think this is about what happens.
Yeah, I was just asking for clarification. I always hate trying to guess what someone's acronyms are.
Yeah, it's just for sales where there is annual recurring revenue.
Oh, recurring revenue. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. I think this is it's a great question. It's a complicated answer. I think you have to really first and foremost clarify which are the most important sales in this type of a process. Is it the upfront securing of the subscription that's most important, or is it the maintenance and growth of the ongoing renewal payments that's the most important? In some organizations I've worked with, it's all about landing that deal, and then you pass it off to a service department that handles the ongoing business. In those cases, you really want to reward the deal and de-emphasize the ongoing revenues from that type of arrangement. But if you do have a sales role where they're trying to grow a renewal, get them to add additional products, features, etc., then you may want to really emphasize and reward those growth revenues that are coming with the renewal by getting them to add an extra feature or an extra product. Obviously, the one thing that you really want to avoid with ongoing revenues is setting up some sort of an annuity type situation where somebody is getting a lot of sales incentive simply because they've been in a territory for a long time and they have a customer base that just continues to renew and they're not actually doing anything, but they're getting a lot. So best to manage those kind of situations with quotas as opposed to commission rates, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And that's what I've also noticed mostly, David. People they want to keep it for the first year and ask your hunters to just go hunt new revenues.
Yeah.
We have another question. How do you think about leveraging monthly, quarterly spiffs when we typically don't change comp plans until the next year?
Yeah, I think that would fall under the category that I mentioned earlier of a sweetener, right? Yeah. Again, you're not revamping your comp plan. You're not changing the focus and the primary goals, but you're adding something extra. Again, I think these kinds of things work best when you're having a challenging year, When you're having a great year, a successful year, people are hitting target, you can actually distract by having too many extra things that you throw in mid-year. So I think be very careful about evaluating those things. Also, definitely make sure that you model out the expected expense of these kinds of things. I think these types of measures can get out of control more quickly than your big overall plans.
Agreed. I think it's usually also it happens because a new sales leader wants to put up a new plan to reward all the reps, right? Like they've come in and they want to reward a little more as well. So sometimes it's not budgeted. So that's usually the problem with these things at
Yeah.
the end of the day.
Exactly. Yep, that's exactly right.
And we have another question from Manon, which is, do you come across compensation for customer success team? They are discovering upsells and continue creating value for customers. Do you have any thoughts around customer success compensation, David?
Yes. I think they're harder to design well than sales incentive plans. That's just my experience. Number one, the role is not always necessarily as directly tied to financial results as a sales role, right? Customer service is often answering inquiries, resolving issues, may not necessarily be doing upselling. In this case, I see with the question here, he's saying that his particular customer success team is discovering upsells and creating value. In those cases, I think if you can design sales incentives that are specifically linked to the upsells, I think they can really drive and motivate a great team, right? I do think that the pay mix issue is a little tricky. You're dealing with less overall pay with customer service individuals. And so you need to be mindful about the amount of risk they can realistically take on in their compensation, right? It's one thing for somebody who has a large base salary and then a large earnings potential for a sales incentive plan on top of that to assume some risk. It's another thing for somebody who's paid hourly or paid a smaller salary, asking them to assume risk. So just be mindful of that when you're dealing with your customer success teams.
No, that's a great point. We have time for one more question, folks. Is there anything else? Awesome. I think with that we can wrap the session up, Eduardo.
All right. I think
Oh, yeah.
the question was really, really good. Can you hear me well? So good. I think the question was really, really good. Thank you, audience, for participating.
Eduardo, we're not able to hear you.
How about now? Is it better?
Perfect. Yep.
Yeah,
That's
All
better.
right. My thing is being finicky today. I don't know what's going on. I think the question is really good. Thank you, audience, for your participation. I think we can close things out. The edit. Do you wanna add anything in here on this slide? Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Folks,
We go ahead.
yeah. So as we told earlier as well, Everstage is one of the leading sales commission softwares out there. We have been rated number one across G2 Gartner for the last 4 quarters continuous, and we have close to 1,500 plus reviews backing us up. Trusted by a lot of enterprising companies like Paychex, McMackler, Mindtickle, Diligent, and it's across different industries as well. So if you're ever looking at implementing tech stack for your sales commission requirements, you can check out Everstage.
Awesome. You can also get a shortcut, and then you can request a demo with our sponsor Everstage by clicking the button at the top of this page, and the team will get in touch with you later today. So that's it for today. Thank you so much, Edith, David, and Siva. Siva had to leave for a meeting, but thank you so much for all your knowledge. Thank you, Everstage, for sponsoring this event. And audience, thank you so much for your participation and for joining us today. You are the best part of MSP. I will see you in the next event, and look out for a follow-up email from me today with the recording, the key takeaways, and all the resources that were made available for us today. Speakers, thank you so much. I will see you next time. And then now we can go hang out backstage.
Yeah.
Bye bye. I'll see you. Thank you.
Everyone, have a nice day.